Who would have thought this number one song from 1987 would be known more for this? Details coming up. Hey everyone, welcome to this edition of Dr. Pundit, where we talk about music, not medicine. On this edition, it's another song that fits right into our popular segment, number one hits of the 1980s. And on this edition, I'm talking about the only number one song by the band Cutting Crew. I Just Died in Your Arms. Yes, we had to talk about it. And this song is easy to criticize, but it's also easy to love. So why don't we just get right into it? The dramatic, sparkly synth rock of the 1980s, the mid-1980s, doesn't really have a name. This stuff wasn't new wave, it wasn't hard rock, and it wasn't even AC, adult contemporary, even though it had something to do a little bit with all of them. It was slick, textured, generally anonymous. It had big gated drum sounds, percussion, and keyboards that were usually louder than the guitars. And I'm a big keyboard guy too. Most of the singers had artfully billowy trench coats and lightly floofy haircuts, and all of them probably wanted to be, say, Sting or Sting-ish, but had to settle for being, normal, good-looking guys who were merely in the right place in the right musical time and who were merely reminiscent of Sting, I suppose. Maybe we should come up with a retrospective umbrella kind of name for the music that was so prominent in pop in the mid-1980s. Maybe bands would thank us if we could. The soft rockers of the late 70s and early 80s probably started getting better guarantees once people started calling them yacht rockers. But I digress. Most of this music is quite pedestrian. It's canned, aggressively mediocre trudges that sacrifice all atmosphere for a certain slickness. And then they don't offer anything that really goes beyond that. The tempos remain stuck in a permanent kind of mid-tempo limbo, and the lyrics are often vapid, horny. They're the self-serious kind of horny, I guess, not the fun kind. Every once in a while, though, that whole mid-1980s style would really click, and someone would really figure out how to turn it into something majestic, I guess, would be the best term for this. An example would be the 1984 number one hit, John Waite's Missing You. Mr. Mister's number one hit from 1985, Broken Wings. The Outfield's sorely underrated number 6 song, Your Love. Cutting Crew's I Just Died in Your Arms isn't as good as those, even though it was a number one song, but it deserves consideration because it's an entry into that canon of musical types in the mid-1980s. And when I first heard the name of this group and the song came out, I have to be honest, I was confused. Where did they come up with the name Cutting Crew? Were they a DJ group? They don't sound like a DJ or a dance group. But why would anyone other than a DJ group have that name? It turns out that Cutting Crew frontman Nick Van Eede once read an article in the UK magazine Sounds that referred to Queen as a cutting crew. At the time, Queen, the band, were recording but not touring, and that sounded pretty good to Van Eede. I guess if he couldn't be Queen, this, in his mind, would get him in that direction. Nick Van Eede came from a village in the English county of West Sussex, and he started playing shows as a teenager. At first, Van Eede was a solo artist, and he'd opened for bigger artists without a backing band, just him and his acoustic guitar, and, believe it or not, his kazoo. Van Eede released a lot of solo singles in the late 1970s, but none of them, of course, did well. A little bit later, he formed a band called The Drivers, which released one album on a Canadian label. On tour in Canada, Van Eed met guitarist Kevin McMichael, who was in an opening band called Fast Forward. Now, of course, as the story goes, Van Eed and McMichael became fast friends, and when the Drivers broke up in 1983, Van Eed wanted to write songs with McMichael, because, hey, that's the way it goes. Van Eed moved to Toronto, sleeping on couches for a long time, as the lore goes, and while McMichael was still playing with Fast Forward, getting gigs here and there, but finally Fast Forward broke up after a tour van crash, and Van Eed and McMichael moved to London, linked up with a bassist and a drummer, and got to work. Cutting Crew didn't want to grind it out on the touring circuit, so Van Eed set up a London showcase for many labels, and the band signed with the Virgin subsidiary Siren Records. Van Eed wrote, "I just died in your arms" almost immediately after hooking up with his ex, who was also the mother of his daughter. In interviews, Van Eed says that he actually said out loud that he had just died in her arms. Now, this was immediately after sex. Of course, Van Eed liked the way it sounded so much, he scribbled a note to himself to write a song about it. He wrote the lyrics the next day, and he had a demo for the song a few days later, if you can believe that. I Just Died in Your Arms is not a particularly romantic song, if you really listen to the words. Van Eed thought that the hookup was a mistake. He would later put it in other interviews, a moment of weakness. And in his lyrics, Van Eed depicts himself as a hopeless naif, unable to resist this woman's charms. Who would have thought that a boy like me could have come to this? Van Eed sings again and again, and that he should have walked away. And then he gasps out some syntactically tortured line about how it's all her fault. I've lost and found, it's my final mistake. She's loving by proxy, no giving, all take. 'Cause I've been thrilled to fantasy one too many times. A couple of lines indicate that I Just Died in Your Arms could be a song about post-orgasmic regret. Now it's over, the moment has gone. I followed my hands, not my head. I know I was wrong. But Van Eed doesn't sound like someone who regrets just what had happened. He sounds like, well, someone who can't wait to make that mistake once again. Van Eed is not a particularly great singer. His voice is a smoky kind of voice in a forgettable kind of way, but it's just enough to make this song noticeable. But in the chorus of I Just Died in Your Arms, he comes off like he's overcome. The words I and died become animal sounds, guttural, long, drawn out, high-pitched, instinctive. Now the verses are vapid, but that chorus has a real sense of need and urgency and longing. It has stakes. Now, something else that's very important in a song, especially a number one song, is the song's arrangement. The arrangement in I Just Died in Your Arms is particularly good. It's pulsing, it's synth hiccups, a soft purr of the cello, the boom of the drums, the way McMichael's guitar sparkles throughout. McMichael's main riff is a splintered, evocative, new wavy kind of thing. Though when he gets to really shredding, the song loses somewhat of its personality just a little bit in order to get the accessibility going. Now, Cutting Crew recorded the song with producer Terry Brown, who'd worked on Rush's peak era albums. And maybe Brown should get credit for the way Van Eed's voice arrives in the intro. A rushing whoosh, like a whirlwind, deposited him on this song. I Just Died in Your Arms was Cutting Crew's debut single, and they released it in the UK in the summer of 1986. The song did well there, peaking at number 4. So, of course, Virgin brought it to the US a year later, where it hit number 1. The band also recorded a new video for that song, which a lot of people really didn't know. It was kind of a generically moody video with split screens and silhouettes and models shot in grainy black and white. And there's also the original UK video where the band runs around a soundstage and furiously mugs for the camera in of course, significant UK fashion, right? Van Eed swishes his trench coat and as he goes around, making it look extra billowy and active. That video's antic tone has nothing to do with the song's pillow humping anguish, but at least it's fun. So I would say the UK video is a little bit more intense, obviously, than the US video. Cutting Crew didn't have much luck on the charts after the number one mega hit, I Just Died in Your Arms. Their follow-up, the very plaintive, snoozy ballad, I've Been in Love Before, hit number 9 and became an adult contemporary staple. The band was nominated for a Grammy for Best New Artist for 1987 and 1988. They lost, of course, to Jody Watley. After that, the band never hit the top 10 in the U.S. again. When Cutting Crew came out with their sophomore album in 1989 called The Scattering, lead single Between a Rock and a Hard Place, that peaked at number 77. And that was the last time the band even hit the Billboard Hot 100. Van Eed blamed the band's label for taking way too long to release the next album, but I think the real issue is that Cutting Crew showed up at the end of that broody synth rock mid-1980s wave. And within a year or two, glam metal had previously decisively replaced all that stuff on the charts. Think of bands like White Lion, Great White, and the rest is history. Also, the band just wasn't that good to have any staying power. In any case, the writing was on the wall. Cutting Crew's bassist and drummer left the group in 1991, and Van Eed and McMichael tried to carry on to no avail as a duo. They even released another album in 1992 called Campus Mentis. Yeah, never heard of it either. That album flopped, and Virgin dropped them soon thereafter. And, of course, that was just way too much, and Cutting Crew disbanded. Van Eed hung around the music business, sometimes recording demos and auditioned, even replaced Phil Collins when Phil Collins left Genesis in 1996. A fun fact, McMichael played on Robert Plant's 1993 album, Fate of Nations, and then moved back to Canada. Sadly, he died of lung cancer in 2002 at the age of 51. Van Eed formed a new version of Cutting Crew in the early 2000s with himself as the only original member. The band kept touring and recording, and they released a new album, mostly orchestral versions of old Cutting Crew songs, just a couple of years ago. And these days, Van Eed is living in Barbados, which sounds kind of nice, I guess, and a fitting cap to a career that, was there. Now, remember the video I referenced at the beginning of this particular episode of Dr. Pundit from Saturday Night Live? Well, in the classic Saturday Night Live sketch from 2000, and I can't believe it's been almost 25 years, Will Ferrell and Horatio Sands play a wedding band who just can't wait to start playing I Just Died in Your Arms. And every time I hear that song, and who doesn't? I think of the way Sands delivers the classic line, "It must have been something you said." Totally evergreen. I'm Michael Douglas, and if you love this episode and you want to see more like it, please don't hesitate to like and subscribe to this channel, Dr. Pundit. Liking it boosts in the algorithm, pushes it out to more people who like it, just like you, to find this channel and hopefully keep up the momentum. As the late great Barry White always used to say, let the music play, and I'll see you on the next episode.